the other part of grief is just a part of love. So I would say if the front of the hand is love, like how much you loved your granddaughter, the back of the hand is grief. If you don't care about the person, or you're not going to have a lot of grief. The more you love, the more you're going to have this kind of grief. That is just an aspect of love. And that is the part of grief that I believe we just honor rather than trying to get over it.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Aurora Winter. Aurora has her MBA as a successful entrepreneur, best-selling author, TV writer, producer, and the founder of SamePagePublishing.com. Using her expertise in film and neuroscience, she helps people tell memorable stories that build brands, books, and businesses. Experts turn their words into wealth. Winner of the Outstanding Nonfiction Book of the Year Award, Aurora's book, Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book, shares 7 ways to generate 7 figures. Aurora will help how the right words can dramatically increase income, impact, and influence. Everybody needs a bit of magic in their life. Aurora's new fantasy series, Magic, Mystery, and Multiverse, is a fun, fast-paced adventure for young adults. It won the Reader's Choice Award, Best Teen Book. Aurora loves to talk about issues that matter and create engaging and entertaining content that adds value. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Aurora. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Well, it's great to be on the podcast with you. And my intention is that people will get a lot of value from listening to this and will get some tips on how they can turn their words into wealth.
Fantastic. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. But one of the things that I start off with in my podcast and has been a focus of my podcast that my listeners love over the last 4 years is talking about a person's origin story. And we're not talking about the fluff origin story. I'd like to know things about you from your earliest childhood recollections that you have discovered led you to where you are today. They were a major impact that diverted you on a different stream. Like there could be multiple little stories that led you to where you are today. It helps the listeners and the viewers on YouTube be able to connect better with the guests. So, Aurora, please tell me your origin story and what key things from your childhood to adulthood that led you to where you're at currently.
Well, as you can probably guess, I love books. And one author, C.S. Lewis, changed my life twice. So when I was 9 years old, I remember reaching up on my tippy toes to get down the last book in the Narnia series. The first book is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The last book is called The Last Battle. And as my little hands touched the spine of the last book in the Narnia series, I felt anticipatory grief because it was the last book and the adventure would be over, that I also felt a thrill of delight that I got to read one more Narnia book. And in that moment, I realized that writers are a kind of wizard, and that just with ink on white pieces of paper, writers can transport somebody to another place and time, even a place and time that doesn't exist, but make it real for them, like a portal that you walk through. So C.S. Lewis changed my life for the first time when I was just 9, because in that moment I decided I would do everything I could to become a great writer like C.S. Lewis. And I'm still working on that. I wouldn't say I'm as great a writer as C.S. Lewis, but he changed my life in that moment. And then curiously enough, he changed my life when I was 31 years old. Fast forward. When I was 31, my husband died suddenly from cardiac arrhythmia. And that gave me PTSD because he died right in front of me. And it was completely unexpected. We had a 4-year-old son, and my husband was my best friend and my business partner. And obviously, the father of my son. Shortly after he died, maybe, I don't know, 6 months after, I read another book, a completely different kind of book by the same author, C.S. Lewis. The book was called A Grief Observed, and his diary of healing after his wife died. And he talks about the mad midnight moments that happen in grief. And I was so relieved to read that book because I thought I was perhaps going insane because the feelings were so intense. I'd never experienced those mad midnight moments before that. And so, because of reading that book, I realized that I was just experiencing grief and that it was intense, but that he got through it and I could get through it. And later, I actually published my own diary of healing, which is called From Heartbreak to Happiness, which was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer. It's simply my diary of healing so that I could help other people see if Aurora could get through grief, maybe I could too. And just like when you're on a dark and windy road, like when I'm driving from Vancouver to Whistler and it's a dark and rainy night, it's easier to follow another car because their headlights illuminate the twists and turns ahead. And so I thought in the same way, perhaps my diary of healing, which is called From Heartbreak to Happiness, would be a contribution to others. So there, one author, two completely different times in completely different ways, changed my life and impacted my career as a writer and publisher.
Wow. That when you talked about C.S. Lewis and going from the first book into the ending book, and then, having that heartache, I had the same thing. It's going to sound silly, but I loved, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory series, right? I remember I was a very young boy and I got this. Do you remember at one time? I don't know if they sell them anymore. It was like a cardboard box and it had all the books in there, right? Of a
I have
series.
that even with Roald Dahl's book and Charlie and the
Yeah,
Chocolate
yeah,
Factory.
I had the original one. I made the mistake of lending it to one of my 5 kids when they were younger, and they took it to their mom's house because we were now divorced and got it back in shambles, literally destroyed and broke my heart. But anyway, that was, I felt your pain just from you talking about
Mm.
C.S. Lewis, just because of that was one of my favorite. And I read those books as well, but I was a real fan of Ronald Dahl, right? So I don't know, I just escaped in those series, but I really appreciated that connection. And you talked about, before I go on to about your husband, is that the period of time where you at 9 years, were you about 9 years of age? Because I know I read about the fact that that's when you really wanted to create your own fantasy book, your own mysteries in
Yes,
life.
when I was 9 years old, I started, I think I wrote 3 chapters, which were fully illustrated about a girl and a
Sweet.
horse in a fantasy world. Of course, like most 9-year-old writers, I didn't finish the book, but I started the first 3 chapters. And I think I still have that somewhere.
So C.S. Lewis then is from what I can tell, he's been hugely impactful on you.
Well, it was interesting. I could fast forward even a couple of years later. I was working as head of development as Canada's largest film and television production company at that time. It was called Atlantis Films. And I actually optioned another book by C.S. Lewis, which was called The Screwtape Letters. And we actually had John Cleese interested in playing one of the roles. It's about a devil and the junior devil, and it's quite funny, sort of in the same way that Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman has sort of got that fantasy, devil, tongue-in-cheek vibe. So it's interesting to see. But one of the things I really love about books is that they are like seeds. And even though C.S. Lewis or any other author, Shakespeare, is dead, the seed remains a viable. And when you open the book and read it or listen to it, it germinates, it becomes alive for the reader of that book. And so I think books are a wonderful kind of idea virus that can last generations and leave a legacy. And when I first published my first book, From Heartbreak to Happiness, I agonized over it because it is a diary of healing. And I'm a Leo, so I'm proud. And part of me really wanted to airbrush it so that I didn't look quite so pathetic because I was grieving. I didn't even know if I wanted to be on the planet anymore, but I had a very compelling reason to stay on the planet, my 4-year-old son. So I needed to. But anyway, I realized that if the book could help one person who was feeling desperate, who was feeling like life wasn't worth living, that book would have done a valuable service. And so I realized for that person, I would rather that they read From Heartbreak to Happiness and go, well, she's pathetic, or go, well, I'm doing better than she is doing at that point, than read it and get an airbrush tidied up version. So I left in the desperation and the hopelessness because there were very low moments, but then there were also high moments because when death rushes so close by, it actually at moments fills you with the ecstasy and joy and miracle of actually being alive, of realizing that this moment, this hour, this day is a gift. And that happened to me multiple times in the aftermath of his death, still happens to me often, but not as often because, like most people, it's easy to get caught up in the to-do list and what's next and paying the mortgage and going to the grocery store and what's for dinner. But when we really lean into memento mori, the Stoic philosophy of remembering death, it can really invite us more powerfully into the present moment, into the fully living right here, right now.
Yeah, I love that. At the end of the day, even my book is just like my podcast. Starts out with my origin is very vulnerable about my childhood all the way to up to where I created my podcast and my brand in 2000. And literally, people that are listening, watching, a book, a podcast, the written word, the articles I post are designed to create a tribe of people that resonate with what I have to say, with my feelings, my trials and tribulations, my joys, my happiness. So those are the people that would like an airbrush version of your book. They're not your tribe. You're looking to help. I agree. That one person. That's the idea I have even with my podcast, my book. Everything I do is to touch one person's heart to give them something that they've lost. They've had hope disintegrate because they've lost somebody. I know in 2017, I lost my 4-year-old granddaughter, which totally
Mm.
devastated me. And it took me on a mental journey of having to rediscover how grateful I was for being alive, how grateful I was to look at now. He just turned 12 a couple days ago. My grandson, who was born a few months before my granddaughter, and thinking to myself, I wonder what she'd look like. She was 4 when she passed, and now she would be 12. And I'm grateful though that I have my grandson still, that God gave me my grandson, my other grandkids too, to watch them grow up. And then the memories I have of that 4 years with my granddaughter, and I'm a picture freak. I spent a lot of time with her in the hospital. I look at them now not as sorrowful, I look at them as joyful, but it took me a while to get through that grieving process. I still have those struggles. I still miss her on her death anniversary or her birthday. But at the end of the day, I'm looking for the tribe to share those stories with through my book or through just being on a podcast that are looking to see whether, like you, I like how you put that. You talked about the fact that person may look at it and think to themselves, I'm already there. And it gives them even more pump their chest out and feel good about themselves. And the person that's not there, you give them hope that they can get there. So I appreciate the fact of you not sugarcoating it and just being you. So thank you so much for sharing that. I can't imagine losing a significant other at such a young age and then still having a 4-year-old, your
Well, I can't
son to
imagine
still,
losing a
like,
granddaughter at 4. That's also
uh,
heart-wrenching.
it's still heart-wrenching. I dedicate in the dedication of my book, she's in there and I talk about her, and it was tough. The first couple of years, my daughter, my oldest daughter's 38, that was her daughter, um, is still suffering, right? I
Yeah.
don't know, when I have an aunt that lost my cousin, um, she was 17, drunk driver,
Uh,
right? Died the night of her graduation. My auntie still hasn't got over it, and that was 25 years ago, right?
well,
So,
I
what?
studied grief in the aftermath of my husband's death and later helped people through grief. And one of the things that I read, I think it was in the book Happiness, which is written by, I believe, Dr. Edward Diner. It's a very well researched book. He was, I think, the past president of the American Psychological Association. Happiness is the name of the book. I might have the details wrong there, but he did a graph and showed that after a significant loss, especially not just death, but a loss that impacted somebody's identity. So it could be the loss of a career, it could be the death of a spouse or a child or a grandchild. It could be something else, even a divorce that impacted their identity, that the average time that people spend in a sharp D V down of despair, I guess, hopelessness, discouragement, anyway, not as happy as they normally were, is 5 to 8 years. So that is tragic. And I actually launched a company called the Grief Coach Academy, which is being run now by a wonderful woman, Audrey White, to help people accelerate. Because to me, it's just like if there's a way to get through it faster than 5 to 8 years, that would be a good thing. So we came up with a system process that, by and large, does help people release grief more quickly. And there's a part of grief that is not uh, to be eradicated. What I want to clarify is that the part of grief that we want to get through quickly is the part where you can't get out of bed and think life has no meaning and can't be bothered to eat. We want to pass through that stage as quickly as humanly possible. But the other part of grief is just a part of love. So I would say if the front of the hand is love, like how much you loved your granddaughter, the back of the hand is grief. If you don't care about the person, or you're not going to have a lot of grief. The more you love, the more you're going to have this kind of grief. That is just an aspect of love. And that is the part of grief that I believe we just honor rather than trying to get over it.
I agree. You won't want to get over the grief drives, at least drove me into being back to a person that I was prior to her going through her health issues for many years in the hospital. It was back to gratefulness, right? It drove me to have gratefulness, like as I mentioned, about my other grandkids, about life, and the fact that, like they always say, today's the present, right? How are you living it? I don't,
Yeah.
I try to use it as a gauge to stay. It doesn't always work, right? Having days of anxiety or days of depression, or sometimes sandwiched, I'm stuck in the sandwich between the two. And I look at those circumstances of people that I've lost in my life, which unfortunately has been a lot. And I just use it to be grateful. And when I get up in the morning, I praise, for me, I'm a Christian. I praise God, saying, thanks for giving me another shot. Welcome me into my day. Let's go at her. Right. And at night, then I'm grateful for the good things. I appreciate the opportunities. I analyze the negative and think, how can I be better tomorrow? Thank you for allowing me to be alive. Good night. Right. So it's driven me in a lot of ways to become a better person through the loss of those I love and the grief. Right. So
Yeah. Well, I think we have a lot in common. So I start every day. I started today, for example, listening to the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. I
Oh
love
yeah.
the version on YouTube that's sung by Sarah McLachlan, who's a
Oh, I
great
love
comedian.
Sarah. Yes,
And
Sarah's awesome.
it just sets the intention of being of service and being a gift. And I really love that way to start your day. And it only takes a couple of minutes. And then I meditate. And then the way I fall asleep every night is a gratitude practice. This is the most effective practice at shifting your happiness long term. And it doesn't even take any time because I do it while I'm in bed. I simply give thanks for three things that went well that day. So anybody can do this. I challenge the listeners, fall asleep tonight thinking of three things that went well and giving thanks for it. And if you want to make the practice even more powerful, acknowledge the part of you that participated or contributed to that thing going well today.
Yeah, that it's very powerful because it's also when I get up, there's times where I've had been abruptly woken up because of something going on with one of my adult kids or grandkids, and I quickly get up earlier than I would have normally gotten up, and I rush around, and I wonder why my day's kind of off. I don't know if you have that happen, Aurora, and it's because I haven't had my 2 to 3 minutes, or maybe sometimes it's longer, where I'm just laying in bed before I swing my legs out and get up and have gratefulness for, oh wow, I opened my eyes again. I got another shot, right?
Yeah,
And think about my day and be excited about aspects like today. Excited to interview and have a fantastic conversation with you. But my day's off. And then I'll check myself. It's 1, 2 in the afternoon. I'll feel kind of, oh, why am I feeling like this? Oh, I know how to fix this. I just stop everything and I have gratefulness. I do what I
yeah,
should have done 7, 8 hours prior. And it's the same with when I go to bed. I like how you said that. When you do the three things, whether it's 3, 5, 10, I find that I'm less likely to ever have bad dreams. I sleep
exactly
more
right.
peacefully, I sleep more content, and I wake up to have my gratefulness exercise in a state where I'm already ready for it. It's just like I went from the sleep was like a blip, and then I wake up and I'm starting again,
You're
right?
starting again. Well, I really was drawn to the whole theme of your podcast, the whole give a heck. I really like that because to me, that's showing up as a contribution and caring. When I got my MBA in 2015, I actually went off to Italy for a year to get my MBA.
Wow.
That was a fun adventure.
Lots of
Um,
pasta.
yeah, lots of pasta. And but after with the MBA, I was like, okay, what should I do now, God? I've got, this life experience. I've got these various things I've done. I've launched multiple businesses and I'm an award-winning screenwriter. I've written a bunch of books. I love talking to people. I love pulling out the gold in their stories. Guide me how I can be most useful as one human being. Like I like Buckminster Fuller's idea of approaching the world, like what can one person do that would make a difference, that would move the needle. And so while there were so many things that I could have done with my experience in film, television, writing, etc., I realized that I'm most valuable, I think, on this planet, doubling down into my love of communication and my love of talking to people and finding out where the gold is in their stories, and then using my MBA and my business expertise, helping them add value to the world through their stories, but in a strategic way that can help launch a movement or can take their business to the next level or can take them as a thought leader to the next level to get on more podcasts or get on the speaking circuit. And so I call it playfully, a podcast host told me, you should write a book with that title. I call it Karma Math. So I did the karma math to see, what could Aurora Winter as one person do that would be most helpful. And I think I'm in the right spot because I love helping people with their books. And I interview them, help them turn it into a book. But because my mind is naturally entrepreneurial and strategic, I also love helping them leverage whatever they're up to and take it to the next level. So that was my version of karma math. I think you've done something similar by choosing to do this podcast, focusing on being a contribution instead of focusing it on building your business and your back end as a financial planner. So that's, you're really showing up as a contribution.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and then You always have what I call the committee of they. You've got everybody out there that they think you should do this, you should monetize, you should rewrite, you should redo your podcast to make it just financially based, and I think to myself, no, I'll just do me. I'll just do what makes me have the warm and fuzzies, like I tell people. I get the warm and fuzzies right here, and I like showcasing the world. And can you imagine after 200 conversations how many fantastic people I've met from around the world? Like I've interviewed
Yeah.
people from all around the world, and it I can't replace that. That's part of my gratefulness. Like oh wow. I had a fantastic conversation with Aurora today. She touched my heart. I felt so warm. I felt so good. And she gave me a couple nuggets
Mm.
that made me stop and realize that life's in session. This isn't a dress rehearsal. Aurora changed my thought process, made me think a little bit deeper. Maybe I've never thought about what she mentioned, and now it's incited a new thought process. And you talk about, I've got that in my all the notes I wrote down here about things that I wanted to ask you. You're being a thought leader. You mentioned so much in that segment that I could divert off to, but I want to try to keep a little bit on focus because I love communicating with people. I love conversation and I love bringing out that seed of greatness that you've already discovered or already living so that the world can see you, right?
Mm.
For the greatness that you are. So one of the things though, and I wrote down here, your life journey is fascinating, right? It literally is. So after the research I did yesterday, yeah, I only spent an hour and a half. How much can you learn in an hour and a half? If you're concentrating and you're serious about it, you can learn a lot about somebody in an hour and a half. You really can, right? Just like a podcast. So, you know, where do I begin? Where do I start? How can we cover everything that is amazing about Aurora and what you've accomplished? It's pretty hard, but we're going to try to get through some of it to touch on all the things you just talked about, from helping people with their book to being a thought leader to using your experience to just better their lives to make them more sure about themselves. How many
Well,
people today
before,
aren't sure about themselves? They live in a
yeah.
life of quiet desperation. They don't have a clue what they want.
Well, I'm really excited to find out what question you're going to ask me next. But before we go on, I
Sure.
want the listeners or watchers to, as they hear a bunch of different things that I've been doing, to just consider like if you're feeling stuck, you can pivot. I've pivoted so many times. I
Pick
feel
me.
like yeah, I feel like my life is definitely not one book. I'm definitely not living Groundhog Day, and I'm proof that you can reinvent yourself, you can do something new, you can test ideas of new things, you can lean into stuff that you're passionate and excited about. And, life is long. I think, I'm planning on living to be over 100. So I don't want to do the same thing all the time. And if you're bored, if you're not challenged, maybe you want to consider doing something new.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to be stuck in the valley of despair, right?
Exactly.
There's always things you can do to take little baby steps. So, you know, I wanted to talk about the fact of, the trajectory in your life changed and you knew what not, we talked a little bit about it, 9 years of age, you thought about writing a book. I know for myself, writing a book was extremely cathartic for me, right? Yes, you've written
Mhm.
multiple books, like the memoir. I think you said you called it a memoir on the grieving process. But at the end of the day, when I wrote my book, I didn't realize how much stuff I had compartmentalized and shoved
Yeah.
down and really hadn't released. I thought I had dealt with it. How many people listening or watching do you think you've dealt with your stuff, or you've just hidden it and it's still eating away at you from your self-conscious and your subconscious part of me, and you're just not knowing where you need to go? When you wrote your first book, what was it like for you? What did it do to your mindset? And was it a trajectory point? Did somebody direct you to write your first book, or has it always been because of that 9-year-old self and C.S. Lewis?
Well, I love what you're saying. First of all, I think most people are not aware how valuable the process of writing a book is. So don't miss out on that. Even if you never published the book that you're thinking of writing, there's value in writing it. And a lot of there's a lot of value in reviewing your past and extracting the gold and washing off the dirt and letting the dirt go. But when you write a book, you do that. You pull out the gold, you pull out the silver, you pull out the diamonds and the platinum, and you discover more deeply who you really are and what you really stand for and how you want to serve the world and be a contribution. And you also have the opportunity to go, okay, well, I'm just going to let that go. I've reviewed it, so I'm complete with it, and I'm going to let it go. So my first published book, firstly, I had written about 30 screenplays before I published From Heartbreak to Happiness. From Heartbreak to Happiness is my diary of healing, but if I'd given people the whole diary, it would have been 10,000 pages. So that book was merely edited. Like I said, I didn't want to airbrush it or clean it up, but I used my expertise as a screenwriter to divide the book into 5 chapters so that I felt each one represented about 20% of the work of grieving. So the last chapter is 10 years, and the first chapter, I think, is a month, because I wanted to reflect how much work of grieving, the heavy lifting of grieving that happened. So that book is edited like a screenwriter would edit it. So mostly I just said, okay, they don't need that. They don't need that, because I write in my journal every day. It would have been way too long. But my first book after that was because I, in my naivete and innocence, actually thought that the Diary of Healing would be enough to help other people go all the way from heartbreak to happiness. But people wanted more. They wanted a process, they wanted a system, they wanted coaching, they wanted to come to events with me. And I was like, okay, I guess my book is only the beginning of the journey for some people, as much as I thought it would give a magic wand that might get somebody all the way through. So then I wrote my second published book is called Grief Relief in 30 Minutes, How to Use the Peace Method to Go from Heartbreak to Happiness. And it shares just one of the 9 coaching processes that I taught or that we teach now at the Grief Coach Academy, that Audrey White and her team teach at the Grief Coach Academy. And the peace method is 5 questions to ask yourself. So if you get a sticky or painful thought, you can identify that thought and then walk it through these 5 steps. So that most of my books are always thinking about a problem that I could solve for somebody else, and who is that person and how can I help them solve that problem. So people who experienced the coaching process called the peace method with me at an event, or because I was training them or coaching them, many people said, wow, I love my therapist. I've been seeing my therapist for 6 months or 2 years. They're amazing. But in that one session, you changed my life. Can you teach me how to do that? So I would teach people. I could give you a quick example if
Sure,
you'd like a taste of it.
sure.
So for the peace method, it's 5 steps, 5 questions, 5 ways to look at something. It's basically cognitive behavioral therapy, but systematized so you can do this yourself as a journaling process. People don't even need to read the book Grief Relief in 30 Minutes. I think if they pay attention to what I'm going to say next, they will have enough to do it. So for example, I'll walk you through something that truly happened to me. Well, firstly, the peace method stands for present, be in the present moment. E stands for express your feelings. A stands for allow or perhaps even appreciate. C stands for consider the contrary. And E stands for enthusiasm, which means to be filled with God. So what do you choose to do, be, or have? Okay, so I was in North Vancouver. No, I was in Los Angeles at a Pete's Coffee having tea, and my brother called me and my cell phone and said that our mom had had a stroke. So my heart rate went up instantly. I was like devastated by this news, and I had to take myself to the corner of the coffee shop, and I did the peace method on myself. So the first step is identify what is the thought, what is the painful thought, and one short sentence. So I liken being in grief or stress. You're in a brick prison. But if you just ram your shoulder against the brick wall, you're just going to get a sore shoulder. But if you focus on one brick at a time, maybe you can loosen it. Maybe you can even pop it out. And who knows, it might be the keystone brick and the whole thing will fall down, or you can work on another one. So be gentle with yourself, be methodical, take it slow, but don't ignore the value of catching that thought and doing it. Maybe if you want, we could even do it together. So my thought that I noticed was causing me the most heart palpitation is my mom is going to die. My mom is going to die. So we're going to do the peace method, sticking with that thought and following it through. Okay, so the first step, be in the present. So I took a couple of deep breaths, try to come in the present, and then I looked at the thought, my mom is going to die. Is that thought in the past or in the present or in the future? Well, we can right away see that from is going to, the verb conjugation, it's a future thought. So already I am making up a story about the future. It hasn't happened yet. So our only point of power is the present moment. So it was useful to observe that is a hypothetical projection about something in the future. So the next step is just to express your thoughts and feelings, because like you mentioned a minute ago, if we don't consider our thoughts and feelings, they don't necessarily go away. So I just tuned into my body. I noticed my heart, I noticed dry mouth. I noticed I was feeling worried. I was feeling anxious. I was feeling I'm going to be abandoned. Well, that's kind of a thought. Anyway, so I noticed that. And then the next step is the A, which is the initial step is just to allow. So again, the thought, my mom is going to die. So then I just took a couple deep breaths, calm myself down, and I allowed that thought without making it wrong or right, but without resisting it or making a war with the thought. And I realized, yeah, actually, that is true. My mom is going to die. We're all going to die. There's no getting out of here alive. And perhaps you will think it's strange, but that immediately shifted me to a more peaceful place. I wasn't fighting with the painful thought. I was like, oh, incoming, useful message. My mom is going to die. Then I considered the contrary, which sometimes this is the most powerful step. And I considered there were some ways my mom wasn't going to die. Her DNA would live on in me and my siblings and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her lessons would live on. Sometimes that's the most powerful step. That was of a little bit of value, but the main one for me was allowing that the truth is that she is going to die. And so then I quickly came, it takes longer for me to explain it than to do it. It only took 5 minutes probably. So then the final step is enthusiasm. So what am I filled with God about? Or if you don't like the word enthusiasm, you could just say engage, like Star Trek engage. So what do I choose to do or be because of this exploration and discovery using the peace method on the thought my mom is going to die? Well, I decided I was going to book a flight and immediately go to see her in the hospital and be there with her. And so in 5 minutes, I shifted from panicky, heart palpitations, anxious, fearful, full of doubt and uncertainty to 5 minutes later, I had a clear path. So that's the peace method. And you can catch any painful or sticky, icky thought, and you can do it as a journaling process, or you can do it with a friend. It only requires neutral curiosity.
Yeah, that I like that. And the part of acknowledgement, right, where you actually acknowledge your thoughts, your feelings, instead of letting them get away from you. I had a expert on my show a couple of years back, I think it was, might even been last year, where they talked about the fact that science has proven when you have that thought, you got about 45 seconds to squash it, to use some sort of process or some sort of system or list or whatever, or word, to be able to change your mindset before it embraces you and makes you in that quiet desperation or in that panic mode, that fear mode. Because, like you talked about, is your mom passing away today or in the future? Like, acknowledging that process is very powerful. I appreciate that breakdown. It is
Yeah,
something I'll
it's really useful.
definitely
And
look at.
I still use it today. And Audrey teaches it at the Grief Coach Academy. And if people want more details, it's written up in the book Grief Relief in 30 Minutes, which I got a lot of pushback on the title, I confess. Maybe I'll republish it under the peace method instead. But the reason I called it Grief Relief in 30 Minutes is because when I coach people through this, it's usually 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 5 minutes. It doesn't
People
take that
overcomplicate
long.
people overcomplicate things. So I have systems and processes on my life coaching side of my business where I do a lot of life coaching with my clients in the finance industry because they have challenges and circumstances from learned behavior when they were young to where they are today that's affecting their whole financial life,
Yeah.
affecting their whole happy now and happy possible in the future. They get so engaged and worried about things that they don't know how to, just get themselves to a point where they understand. And I'll give them simple little teachings like, here's a process I call the 70-30 process and how to narrow down and get your tribe of people that are conducive to helping you grow, to continue to climb, not be camped and be boo-hoo woo-hoo. And they'll go, well, it has to be more complicated than that. Is that all you use? Yeah, been using it for myself for a long, long time. Does it always
Let's
work?
hear your 70-30 rule. I want to hear more. That sounds intriguing.
You want to hear about it? Well, we'll get into that at the end because I have so
Okay.
much I want to go through. But
All
yes,
right.
my 70-30 principle, it literally will take me a few minutes to explain, but I'm so captivated by your story and who you are, that I don't want the listeners or myself to miss any of that. But you and I can certainly talk about it if we don't have time during the recording. It's helped lots of people, helps me too. I did a podcast on it, even a solo podcast on it.
Okay.
But
Excellent.
anyway, so one of the things that, you talk about writing a book and you put all this information in it, and then people wanted processes or lists or this many steps, right? Is it possible? Because I know books that I have listed, I listen to more books than I read now. I use Audible a lot just because I read so much that when I do read an actual book, I fall asleep now. I have to have, I prefer Audible. I still do read books, but I find that I'm more alert and attentive when I listen. But at the end of the day, when you get these books that are all fluff, they tell all these stories, but they give you no real, you know, meat and potatoes, how to be satiated and move forward. So, do you believe that your books, once you start, like I know Turn Words into Wealth, you have 7 steps, correct?
I
That
have
you go through.
7 different ways of making
Yes.
7 figures with your book and your business. And I share actual stories of my clients and myself, but also famous people like Hillary Clinton or David Goggins or Jordan Peterson. Like, what are their actual models so that
Oh,
people can
okay.
go, okay, of these 7 different models, which one would I like to try? And here's some data, some other people who've done it. I could go study them, or I could just give this a whirl. So, for example, one of them is maybe your book or your idea could be turned into a movie. So, my fantasy series, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, which follow it on Kickstarter, the boxed set with the third books coming out on Kickstarter. Just search my name, Aurora Winter, on Kickstarter and follow it, which is free. Then you just get invited to participate when it launches. Anyway, BBC is interested in turning it into a TV series. So
Wow.
that is
Congratulations.
really exciting. They're talking about doing 12 episodes, and that's one of the 7 ways of monetizing a book. And that's a really great way, especially if it is fiction. Although, as you may know, even nonfiction can be turned into series. Like Netflix did a series about Marie Kondo and the joy of tidying up, which you may have seen. And that is like amazing because English is not even her first language, but this little petite Japanese woman, Marie Kondo, she goes into the homes of people who have kind of hoarding problems and helps them tidy it up. And it's actually very engaging. So that's another way of turning a book into a TV series or a movie idea. I have a client that we're working on 9 legal thrillers. His first legal thriller, Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer, has got over 3,000 reviews on Amazon. The
Wow.
second book in his portfolio of legal thrillers, Jake Fox, Ties That Blind, is coming out in December. And we're writing 8 more. So there'll be 9 in the Jake Fox series, as well as the first book, Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer. Anyway, my client and I went to a media festival, and his books have attracted interest. They want to do potentially a TV series. So that can be a great way, one of the 7 ways of monetizing a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Another way that we talked about very briefly is before we started recording, is to use a book as a lead magnet to build your business. I especially like this as a way of pivoting a business or testing a new idea. When I was running the Grief Coach Academy, Anthony Robbins' team interviewed me about how to coach people through grief. And that was a great call. And 100 or so of Tony Robbins coaches listened, and they valued that. But then people kept asking me, how did you get on TV and radio? How did you write so many books, Aurora? And maybe I could do that too. So I thought, well, maybe I could write a short book and see if people would be interested in having my help with their messaging, their marketing, and publishing a book, and maybe going to the next level as a thought leader. But I was known as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy. This is not exactly the same thing, even though you've taken a dive into my history, and I've done multiple businesses before that. My small email list of about 12,000 at that time just knew me as the person to help them through their heartbreak or train them to be grief coaches. Anyway, I called the director of coaching of Tony Robbins at that time, Mark von Musser. I said, hey, would you like me to present to your coaches about messaging and marketing? He's like, absolutely. I know your background. I think this would be great. So I choreographed the interview. I gave him the questions. I was prepared, but it was about a 1-hour interview. But I thought, we covered a lot of ground. I transcribed it. I turned it into a little short book. It's called Marketing Fast Track. You can get it for free at turnwordsintowealth.com, or you can get it for free wherever books are sold. And the ebook is for free. You'd have to pay for the print book. Obviously, Amazon is not in the business of shipping you out a print book for free. Anyway, so then I used that to send an offer to my email list of 12,000. I said, would you like this little book? The book is free, but please pay for the shipping and handling. So they paid $4.77 for shipping and handling. So I was out of pocket about $1 a book. To pay a buck for a prospect is a good deal. And then they got a series of 5 videos, which people can still get the updated versions if they want to go to turnwordsintowealth.com. So they got 5 videos, and they got to see who is Aurora, what does she stand for, what is her marketing, what are her marketing and messaging ideas, what would it be like to work with her in a book, and useful information they could apply right away to writing their book or creating a $1 million message or creating a marketing funnel. And then at the end, it's just like, if you want more and you are this kind of person or business owner, sign up for a free strategy call. And then I spoke to some prospects, and that generated $250,000 of new business in 90 days. So that was a good test. And I realized, people do want my help with their marketing, messaging, and publishing their books. So, and then just like with From Heartbreak to Happiness, it was important to me to add value. So I left the breadcrumbs. If I had been leaning into the part of me that is the perfectionist, I would have taken Marketing Fast Track down when I published Turn Words into Wealth. Turn Words into Wealth is like a 55,000 page, very highly polished and researched and beautiful book. But I thought, no, it could be valuable for somebody to see an example of what a book looks like that's basically transcribed from a 1-hour interview, that they could do it talking into their iPhone or having a friend interview them, or even answering their own questions that they decide in advance. And then they could see an example of a little inexpensive book that actually moved the needle for a real person. So people can get, as I said, Marketing Fast Track. It's available on turnwordsintowealth.com or wherever books is sold, as an example. And then in order for it to make any kind of financial sense for me, I gave away the first chapter of Turn Words into Wealth at the end of that book, so that they perhaps would be led to turn words into wealth. So a couple of things to point out for other people who might consider this. 1 hour is enough content to make a little short book. nowadays you could make a nice audio or a video on YouTube, but there is something to be said for a physical book as opposed to an ebook. Because I think a lot of ebooks that people sign up for never get read, but there's something about, oh, you got it in the mail. It came. It can be handed on to somebody else. You're like, oh, that person actually sent me a gift, not just a bunch of drivel. It was, even though the book is short, it is very useful and people have implemented ideas from it, from Marketing Fast Track. The second thing to notice is I added more value with the video sequence that happened after that. So you want to build on the value that you've delivered with your book with more value, which in my case was 5 videos. If they go to turnwordsintowealth.com and sign up, they get 5 videos about how to attract capital clients and media coverage. And then at the end, you can make whatever your offer is. If you have something to sell that is under $2,000, probably you would just offer it on whatever web page is the sixth message. But if you're selling something like you are, like financial services that are more hands-on and the lifetime value of the customer is more than $2,000, probably the most appropriate thing to do is offer to chat with them and see if it's a good fit. And then I also want to be transparent that part of the reason that it generated $250,000 in 90 days is because I had a really high-end offer, right? So it wasn't a bunch of $5 things I was selling. I was helping people write a book, publish the book as a best-selling award-winning book, get on podcast, really taking their business to the next level. And I also had done various things to make the price, make it an irresistible offer. So you want to have an irresistible offer that people are like, well, that's a no-brainer. So I think there's some points in there that hopefully anybody who's listening who's an entrepreneur could implement.
Oh, absolutely. I like, even though the turn words into wealth, you said it was 500 pages. Is that what you said? Something like that?
50,000 words. So it's
50,000 words. So that's
it's about
about,
200,
I was
250
just,
pages.
yeah, because mine's 30 some thousand. It's 140 pages or whatever. But yeah, that's a perfect, I like it though that you discussed other people and what they had utilized to become successful, acknowledging that we don't always have the ideas. Everything can be regurgitated, but you bringing it to light to people is very obviously. There's things in the book that are unique to yourself, like your fingerprint, but it's nice that you shared the platform, the stage of your book with other people. It's always back to that servant heart, right? You want to
That's
serve
exactly
people.
right.
You want to serve people and give them, here's an A, B, right? A is
Yeah,
what B is what this person did. Maybe you take a little bit of A and B. Maybe you just take me. Maybe you take them, whatever the case may be. But you got that servant heart, and I really appreciate that. Yes, you did a very good job of sharing with people the power of why writing a book is good and how simple it can be. Like you said, you had that hour-long discussion with, I believe, with Anthony Robbins' team, and publishing it into a book. And
yeah.
you also questioned in that part of that conversation, you questioned the title of one of your books. That's good too, though, because you're always thinking, you're always creating, you're always wondering, how can I do better for others? Maybe changing that to the piece, whatever is the journey I need to go on. So those listening or watching, my life has dramatically changed. And it's not about how many books I sold. It's not how many people have enjoyed the book. It's those one or two individuals that have reached out to me, which has been more than that, from as young as high school kid to people in their 70s telling me how reading their book allowed them to escape from the prison they had created for themselves. Maybe not in their whole life, maybe just a certain avenue of their life, but and that for yourself too, when people give you kudos about what you've written or what you've spoke on a podcast or on an interview, it gives us that little bit more energy to continue to proceed forward, to continue to serve others. Because so for those listening or watching, we do appreciate the kudos. We do appreciate that review. We do appreciate that little message you send or that comment on social media about how we've touched your hearts, or how you are looking forward to even it now that you've watched a little short video or whatever the case. Like you were talking about, you release videos that tie along with it that people can subscribe to their website. All of it is a servant heart. Yes, we like money. We need money to survive. But really, at the end of the day, the money is fleeting. The emotion is concrete, right? For me, it stays for a long time. I can still think about the dad that reached out to me about his daughter that wrote an article about my book, and she was in for her high school newspaper and sent it to
Oh,
me, right? Just stuff like that. That will stick with me till the rest of my life. And now I'm good. I'm really good friends with this girl now. She's in her early 20s, like 21 now, I think. And you know what I mean? She comments on my social media. I reach out to her and her dad. Stuff like that makes it
well,
all worth it. All the tears, all the anguish, all the anxiety, the depression, writing the book, and going through the publishing process. It was all worth
it
everything
was
just for
worth
that
it.
one person.
Well, you're reminding me with this book, Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, my sister-in-law is a teacher. So I spoke at her school and gave away some advanced review copies of Magic Mystery and the Multiverse. And this one girl wrote to me, and it was like pencil, on the with the big lines with the very careful pencil. I think she must have been 11. And she's like, oh, I love the character of Anna. I want to read the next book. When is it coming out? And oh, I really love the dog. Can you write more about the dog in the next book? And it was like, oh, that was like so beautiful. Yeah, it's really touching. So, as you say, if people are enjoying this podcast, please leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, or do yourself a favor and go to Amazon and get Dwight's book, Give a Heck: How to Live a Life on Purpose and Not by Accident, and leave him a review. He's got some stellar reviews, but only 1% of people leave reviews. So if you like the book, go and leave a review and give it back to Dwight because he's showing up here every week to contribute to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder if it's even as high as 1%. Sometimes I wonder based on book sales. But anyway, I appreciate that. So, one of the things, we're running out of time here, so much more I wanted to discuss. I'm looking here to see what is the thing that I wanted to talk to you about the most. Well, one of the things that interests me is your delving and working in neuroscience, right? What's the neuroscience of communication? What are some of the common communication mistakes that people make?
Oh, that's so useful. I think it behooves all of us to learn about how the brain understands and processes information. Most of us who are well educated have learned exactly the wrong way to communicate at university or at college. And so, but just I'll walk you through the three simple steps to communication. It will make sense and you'll be able to implement it right away. And then I invite you to consider, when your mind drifts, did the speaker miss one of these steps? So you need to do them in this sequence. First, the ancient reptilian brain, or the croc brain, it filters all information because there's way more information than we can process. So you need to start with a hook or something attractive so that you catch attention. It's called a hook, or the subject line on an email, or the title of a book, Turn Words into Wealth. That is an example of a hook. So you want to tell the person, why should they listen? What category are we in? If you want to learn about Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, that would be probably a different person than the person who wants to learn about how to turn their words into wealth. So whenever you're speaking, like a lot of videos and even podcasts, they start off with, my name is X and I'm the founder of Y. Don't start that way. People only listen for a few seconds nowadays. So your first thing that you said, like when I thanked for being on your podcast, I said, my intention is to help the listeners turn their words into wealth. So right away, I'm like, oh, Aurora is going to have that intention. Maybe I'll listen for another few seconds. So first, it's like the subject line in an email. The second step is actually the midbrain. Human beings have survived through the millennia, not because we have the sharpest teeth, not because we are the fastest runners, but because of tribe. So we are very vigilant and attentive to social cues. We want to know, who is this messenger? Who else thinks this message is worth listening to? Why should I listen? Is this part of my tribe? So, for example, me being on your podcast is social proof both ways. People who follow me will think, oh, I should check out Dwight. People who follow you will be, oh, Aurora must be worth talking to, or you wouldn't have her on the podcast. But another example would be Magic Mystery in the Multiverse won the Reader's Choice Award, Best Book for Teens, and you can see a little award there, or Turn Words into Wealth, one outstanding nonfiction book of the year. And we see that is appealing to the midbrain that wants social proof. Or my first published book that we talked about earlier, From Heartbreak to Happiness, was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer. So that's social proof. You want to tech that, so it takes much longer to explain it than to do it. In a few seconds, you can say why they should listen, what category we're in, and you can give social proof. And then you want to give a nugget of information. Most people either start off by saying what their name is. I don't care what your name is until I know why I should listen to you. I'm not even listening. People, honestly, it's like 5 seconds. You're lucky if you get 5 seconds. But if you are talking on a topic that they're interested in and there's social proof, they could listen to you for 90 minutes. They could binge watch you for hours. So it's not that people have no willingness to listen. It's that unless you pass those first two gatekeepers, you haven't got attention. So pass the first two gatekeepers, and then you have permission to give a nugget of information. Here would be an example of a nugget of information under the Turn Words into Wealth category. So studies have shown that the value of a story is significant. They took 100 different objects on eBay with a story and without a story. They were transparent that this was a social test that they were doing. Can you guess if the objects with a story sold for more? And these were not hype. These were stories, such as pot mitts are for sale. And I remember my grandmother using these pot mitts to take chocolate chip cookies out of the oven when I came home from school. And I used to love having those fresh baked cookies and having a glass of milk with my grandmother. When you buy the pot mitts, you're not getting the cookies, you're not getting the grandmother, but you have attached significance to the pot mitts because of that little story. And the stories were not written by the same person. There were 100 different writers of these little stories. So do you want to guess if the stories sold, attracted more value, and by how much?
Oh, stories attract, I'd say 100% more, or at least minimum, maybe 1,000%, because stories connect to our heart. It connects to what we didn't realize we're missing.
Bingo. So both guesses are good and both guesses are low. The answer was over 2,000%.
Wow.
So a story which adds significance creates an emotional connection and can increase the value of what you're selling by over 20-fold. So if we're ignoring and omitting stories, we are leaving a lot of money on the table because we're not creating that emotional connection. Also, stories can go viral. People share stories, they remember stories, they tell stories. Whereas if I just told you the data that a story can add 21-fold to your bottom line, you might have forgotten that statistic. But with the story, it's more memorable. So I demonstrated doing it as I was doing it. So if you can just remember, and also I asked a question, so it was a back and forth. So listening is very expensive in terms of calories. So our croc brain or our gatekeepers are always looking for ways to stop listening. And most people are not really listening, they're waiting to talk, but you're deeply listening. Most people cannot listen for as long as you are demonstrating that you can. Most people cannot listen for more than 20 minutes, which is why TED Talks are 20 minutes. So you don't want to be rambling for too long. So I'd say if you can get the hook or the reason why they should listen out in the first few seconds, a few more seconds for social proof. It's the Wayne Dyer, it's the award-winning book, it's the other people just like them listen. And then you can get your little bit of content. I would say 3 to 5 minutes of content, and then you do it over again.
Yeah, that's one thing. I, at one point in time during the pandemic, was challenged by a good friend of mine He is a coach, and I've known Tony for a long time, and he challenged a group of us in his group to do daily videos. And I did
Mm,
837 live videos. I never missed a day. And through
wow.
that process, the reason I bring it up, can you imagine the first videos that I did? I've fumbled, I stumbled, and they were live videos. I'd
Mm,
have conversations with people. I became a better listener because of it. My podcast has developed my listening skills and making sure I categorize the importance of what that person is saying on a higher level than me wanting to respond. As you mentioned, people do that. And I literally got to the point where I was in my going into the third year, and I started challenging myself to do it in a minute, to get to the
mm.
point, to, get to the point and not ramble on and add too much information and content, because we all seem to do that. People overshare, right? We tend to, especially depending on how we were raised and how worthy we felt as a child, but we won't get into that. That's a total different part of coaching. But I really enjoyed the fact of doing that video process to keep it short, sweet, and my engagement went up because of the fact that, as you mentioned, even while podcasting or leaving a message or starting a statement, people's attention span is like a mosquito, right? Flying by, it's gone. It's just, all
Well,
right. So,
what
go
I
on.
really celebrate about that example with the over 800 videos, and then you're getting better and better, reminds me of a study that we looked at when I took my MBA in 2015. And they was for students in university who were taking a photography course. And one group was told that they would be just marked on the one photograph that they took that they thought that was the best. And the other group was told, we're just going to measure the quantity of photographs you take. And the people who were told they had to do one great photograph, they agonized over it. They shot like, a dozen photos and submitted a dozen. The people who were told it's just quantity did thousands, and they produced the best ones because we learn by doing. And so there's a lot to be said for stop agonizing and just get the camera out or get the pen out or whatever it might be. Like I have a TikTok channel. It's called Aurora Fantasy Books, and I've been challenging myself to post a video a day, and they're quite short. And because most of my traffic is LinkedIn or more businessy, I'm allowing myself to just attract the fantasy readers and play with the videos. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a ton. But just like, okay, well, that's interesting. That kind of video that I didn't think that much of, people really liked it. And it was more produced, didn't get that much traction. Okay, so well, doing it, you get more friends, right? People comment and you connect. And it's all about connection. So if we can let go of having the spotlight on ourselves, which shuts down creativity, and put the spotlight in our hearts on the people who will be watching or listening or reading, it shifts it because then it's like, how can I serve? How can I be a contribution? How can I let them know what this video or this book is about quickly so that the right people actually pay attention and get the nuggets? Instead of hiding the nuggets 15 minutes in, let's tell them the nuggets that are coming so that they get
Oh,
the
yeah.
value.
Well, my first videos, some of them were 5, 10 minutes long. And then you fast forward to the last, let's say, 100. And I literally had them at a minute. I cut them off right at a minute. I got to a point where I had to also understand my tonality and my cadence. So I didn't want to be so rushed that they felt any anxiety from
Right.
listening to me. So I literally, and I did them live. I did not record them in practice. My daughter would call me today and say this and that, or a client would say this and that. And I thought, that's an interesting little tidbit. I'm going to do a minute video on that today. And
I
that's
like
how
it.
and I kept a running journal. I still have it on OneNote. And I literally would be some places and I'd think of something and I'd quickly pull up my phone and type it. If I was driving, I'd tell my phone to leave a note. right? And think, I heard that on the radio. That sounds pretty interesting. So some days I'd look at what am I going to talk about, and I'd have 100 different things I put in over the last month. And the other days it would be two, three, and it was a real good journey because it also, unfortunately, we don't have the time to discuss it. But I'm also a huge fan of wordsmithing, and I know that's something you are as well in regards to the power of the word and stuff. And we're going to have to get you on again in the future. It would be great to discuss more things with you in regards to, even where you're going with possibly having your book as a television series. And there's so many other things that we could discuss and help out the viewers or the listeners. But the last thing I wanted to ask you, though, because we're at the end of the show, is Aurora, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
I would say, what if you were the messenger that somebody else needed to hear from today so they didn't check out? What if your smile, your listening, your, I don't know, not honking at somebody that cut you off in traffic really mattered? How would you choose to live today? Because I believe that it does. And if you're still breathing, I believe there's a reason you're still on the planet.
Yeah, I love that because you don't know how you can be the catalyst to somebody who's having a challenging day, maybe thinking of self-destruction, suicide, or whatever. Just being kind, smiling, giving a sincere compliment, a genuine reach out to that person. Sometimes,
Exactly.
and even understanding, like, again, we could have another whole podcast, just understanding people's body language, being a student of human nature, understanding this person's love language is touch. I've known them enough that if I put my hand on them or put my arm around them, they're gonna feel so much sense of relief and support. Or a person that words of affirmation, right? They need, because
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite books, by the way, five love languages. I've
I
had
like that
authors.
book too.
Yeah, I had an author on that wrote a book and developed a game around it, but
Oh,
it wasn't the original author of Five Love Languages, but it was another person that wrote a book about how to interpret and utilize it because he worshipped the book so much himself. He developed a dice game to
oh,
practice and utilize the love languages to ensure that you're helping people rise up and climb. And along the way, you're dragging yourself along too, right? So,
exactly. No, it's a
but
great
it,
book, and it's good to tune into what other people need. And I'd love to come back. Maybe when my Kickstarter is live, we could talk
sure,
about
sure.
fantasy and the Kickstarter.
You know how to reach out to me, communicate. I'd love to have you on again. So obviously, I've seen there's quite a few different ways for people to reach out. I'll make sure, for those new to the show, go to giveaheck.com, go to the podcast top and go into the podcast part of the website. You'll see a picture of Aurora and the detailed show notes. I will make sure all the websites, as many as I can, find, are in the show notes because I actually do the show notes myself now. Um, I'm very particular about it, so I make sure that if you have call to actions, that you have more than one site that people can find all that information. Which would be the most prevalent one when people are driving for them to remember? Because obviously, you can go to giveaheck.com, find it, but for those of you that are a stickler and you're just going to remember it, what would be that way they should reach out to
I
you?
think the easiest one to remember is either turnwordsintowealth.com, because that we've been discussing. So turnwordsintowealth.com, and then you can sign up and get those free resources. Or if you can remember, samepagepublishing.com, same page publishing. You can also get the freebies there, but you can also see all of the books that I've helped with. And if that's something you'd like help with your book, you'd like to have somebody interview you and turn it into a book, then that's something we can discuss. But I think it's very worthwhile, getting the books, reading the books. And I love books. I mean, you can get a decade of somebody's wisdom and expertise by reading the books. I really recommend people read Turn Words into Wealth, which is available on Amazon or if you go to turnwordsintowealth.com, you can get the free ebook version.
Oh, it's fantastic. I look forward to it. I'm definitely going to have to follow up with what we had talked about before we hit record in regards to the book. So I really appreciate you being on. I'm going to wrap up the show with a tagline that I talk about. But is there any last final comments or things you would like to share before I wrap up the show?
I really appreciated being on the show with you. You're an excellent listener. You're very present. So it was really a delight getting to know you. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you investing your time in my listeners, viewers, and myself, because again, at the end of the day, people don't realize time is so precious, right? We only have
So
one
true.
kick at the can. Life's in session. This is not a dress rehearsal, is my favorite thing to tell people. Live life, enjoy life, meet fabulous people, capture more memories, live in those memories when you miss somebody, whether it's through grief or they're still living, but just create memories, live a great life,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Aurora. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.